Dan il-programm ġie mwassal lilkom minn The Exterminator, Sotis, People and Skin, Lisa Milanes, Beauty Point Med Aesthetic, Nail Studio Fanatic, Ian Vassallo il-ħaġi Podologist.
Erġa' segwi dan il-programm fuq Net on Demand.
Only for men.
Wi-Fi veloċi f'darek u kapaċitajiet mill-aqwa, dawri mill-flessibilità ma' Melina.
Poster kbir kommemorattiv fl-okkażjoni tar-rebħ tal-BOV Premier League minn Hamrun Spartans u tar-rebħ tal-Elizabeth FA Trophy minn Birkirkara. Nar il-ħadd li ġej mal-gazzetta Il-Mument. Poster li kull partitarju ta' Hamrun u Birkirkara m'għandux jitlef. Il-Mument tal-ħadd li ġej timbieħ €2.
Iċċelebra l-festa ta' jumlom ġewwa l-Kortile Restaurant. Atmosfera mill-isbaħ u ikel tal-aqwa kwalità. Għal din l-okkażjoni se nkunu tinservu bufè għal prezz ta' €45 kull persuna u €18 tfal taħt 12 sena. Biex tibbukja l-mejda ċempel issa 21-490-534 9949-8903 jew żuru s-sit elettroniku ilkortile.com.mt. Parking mhux problema. Il-Kortile għal dawk il-momenti sbieħ.
Working towards a dream is not only about the final destination, those early wake-ups, the cold starts. These rough days are all worthwhile as long as you have the right people by your side, moving towards the right cause. Because it's who stands behind you that really counts.
Il-ħaddiema u l-pensjonanti komplow jesperjenzaw aktar żidiet fil-prezz ta' prodotti essenzjali fosthom il-prezzijiet tal-butijiet u t-sokkor. Roberta Bela u sħabu l-Ministri tal-Gvern qed jibqgħu ma joffru ebda soluzzjonijiet jew proposti konkreti bil-Ministri Clayton Bartolo u Rodli Galdes lanqas biss kienu kapaċi jwieġbu kemm telet ir-rata tal-inflazzjoni. Iċ-ċezzi li għaddew bejn id-deputat Rosien Kutajjar u l-imprenditur Jorkin Fenek kienu ta' interess pubbliku minħabba r-relevanza tagħhom. Dan kien konfermat mill-Awtorità tax-Xandir wara li l-Partit Nazzjonalista ressa ilment kontra l-PBS peress li dakinhar li dawn iċ-ċets kienu pubblikati ma kien hemm ebda referenza lihom fl-aħbarijiet ta' TVM. Wara r-riżenja tas-Sindku Laburista tax-Xara u l-pożizzjoni jibsa li ħass-Sindku tal-Gżira aktar sindki Laburisti qed isemgħu leħinhom kontra l-mod li qed imexxi bih il-Gvern, inkluż il-Kunsill Laburista ta' Żebbuġ li wissa dwar il-biża' li jintilef darba l dejjem patrimonju storiku li hemm f'din il-lokalità. President Ukren Volodymyr Zelensky waqt diskors lill-Qorti Kriminali Internazzjonali f'The Hague talab twaqqif ta' Tribunal tal-Gwerra li ċerta li ssir il-ġustizzja mar-Russja diversi massakri u reati oħra kontra il-bniedem waqt il-konflitt tal-Ukrajna. L-aktar aħbarijiet żur is-sit netnews.com.mt.
Sinjuri, nselmilkom, s-serata tajba nilqakom għal edizzjoni oħra tal-programm NATURAlment, il-programm dwar l-ambjent naturali li qed jixxandar fuq net-television kull nhar ta' ħamis filgħaxija. U kif tafu f'dan il-programm ta' kull ġimgħa naqbdu ma' xi tema marbuta ma' xi kwistjoni ambjentali li tkun għaddejja u mbagħad fit-tieni parti niffukaw fuq proġetti diversi li jkunu qed jagħmlu jew BirdLife Malta x'dan huwa programm ta' BirdLife Malta jew nkella NGOs oħrajn marbutin ukoll man-natura. Illum però se jkun programm speċjali għaliex f'din is-sensiela għall-ewwel darba għandi mistieden li mhuwiex Malti, huwa internazzjonali, mhux Malti fis-sens li ġej minn barra, ġej minn Londra, bi pjaċir fil-fatt qed nilqa' miegħi fl-istudju illum u se jkolli allura naqleb bl-Ingliż, ambjentalista magħruf fl-Ingilterra magħruf bħala The Urban Birder. Se nitkellmu dwar x'inhu l-urban birding f'dan il-programm ta' sija. Fit-tieni parti se jingħaqad magħna mbagħad dak li forsi nistgħu nsejħulu niddeskrivuh bħala l-Urban Birder ta' Malta, Steve Zammitlupi li kien magħna wkoll fil-bidu f'din is-sensiela. Se jkolli naqleb l-Ingliż biex nilqa' lill-mistieden barrani li għandi li wasal dirett minn Londra u miegħu se nitkellem dwar dan is-suġġett li għal ħafna minnkom forsi mhuwiex suġġett familjari, però se nkunu qed niddiskutuh illum biex anke nispjegalkom xi fisser. I welcome you to the program, David Lindo. As I told our viewers, I will now switch to English because I am honored to have an international guest today.
I must say my Maltese is a bit rusty.
Okay, so we'll focus on English if you don't mind. If you want to try some words in Maltese, feel free. I know you have been here for a week already, so maybe you picked up something. Anyway, David Lindo is one of the most influential persons as also classified by the BBC WorldLife magazine, and we are going to discover why today. But the main topic today will be urban birding. As you can see also on David's t-shirt, he is the urban birder. And urban birding is a concept which maybe many people who follow also what is happening in the nature environment in Malta are not very familiar with. And I would like to explore what this means, what is urban birding, how it is different from birding in other areas. Malta, as you know, is a small country, but we still have some urban birding. In fact, in the second part, we will also welcome, we can describe him as the Malta's own urban birder, because he is an urban birder, in fact, Steve Zammitlupi. But let's start with you explaining a bit what is urban birding and why are you known as the urban birder?
Well, urban birding is all about watching birds in urban areas, as the name suggests. And it's actually been around for a long time. I think people have been watching birds in urban areas before realising they're actually doing it. I mean, myself included. I mean, I think it goes back as far as maybe 150 years ago in the UK anyway, because there were people living in London who were recording the birds that they saw around them, not necessarily for scientific purposes, purely sometimes in poetry or literature. But I became an urban birder because I was born in London with this innate interest in natural history. I was, you know, all over insects and invertebrates initially, but no one around me had that interest. I had no mentor. In fact, the part of London I lived in was predominantly immigrants, so black immigrants as well as Irish immigrants, and so it's kind of alien to be interested in that sort of thing. But I taught myself, and I remember being told, because I was asking people, what's that bird, what's this bird? No one knew, so I called sparrows baby birds and blackbirds mummy birds. I was told that wildlife, if you're going to watch wildlife, you need to go to the countryside, but I had no one to take me. So I looked around me and I realised actually where I am in the city there's lots of things to be seen, so I kind of unconsciously became an urban birder, and then I started promoting the concept about 16 years ago when I realised that actually, you know, there's something to be said about this. So I became the urban birder because I received an email from the BBC 16 years ago, and I've been birding all my life, but I've been doing other jobs. And they asked me if I'd be interested in being on TV and BBC on this programme called Springwatch, which is the biggest natural history programme. Yeah. Yes. Talking about my local patch in West London, which is called Wormwood Scrubs, and it's also the name of a prison which is next door to it. So I said, sure. And the night before, I remember meeting with the director and the crew, and the director said, tomorrow, David, when you're out in the field, just tell us what you know, enjoy yourself. And by the way, can we give you a screen test? And I said to myself, screen test? Me? Why? But in reality, I said, oh, yeah, sure. And that night, I went home and I was pacing up and down the kitchen thinking, I want to be the next David Attenborough. I want to be clambering over rocks in the Galapagos and going through jungles in Indonesia. But that's not going to happen. But I do like wildlife in cities. I like birds in cities. And then I thought of Jamie Oliver, the famous chef, British chef, and I thought, at the time, he was called the Naked Chef, and I thought it was quite interesting to have a name, a moniker, a brand. So I thought, maybe I should have one myself, because no one in my world has a brand name. So I thought, the City Birder? What about the Urban Birder? That sounds all right. So the following day, I did the filming, I called myself the Urban Birder, I did my screen test, and then when the clip came out in the programme a few months later, everyone went mad. There was lots of people contacting me saying, what a cool name and all that sort of thing. So I called myself the Urban Birder originally to try and get more work from the BBC. But when I realised that the window of opportunities like this, I realised that actually this Urban Birder thing is quite important because no one's talking about urban wildlife and urban birds and their conservation and getting people engaged the way I want to do it. No one's doing that. So I decided to push on, but to call myself the Urban Birder. And then everyone started calling me the Urban Birder anyway, so...
So you have already explained who is David Lindo, but you told us you come from London. So from what I understand from your introduction, now you do this and just this, urban birding, no?
No.
So tell us a bit more about it.
I'm actually, my whole thing is about engaging people in urban areas with wildlife and the environment, but through the medium of birds.
All right.
So I use birds to try and get people to realise that you can walk out of your door and just look up and listen and just feel, and nature is all around us, regardless of where you are. So that's my main purpose in life. But having said that, I'm an urban birder, but I've been to the Antarctic, I've been in the middle of the Brazilian Amazon jungle. I mean, I can go anywhere. It doesn't really matter. It's more of a... I see the urban birder as a brand, or what I do as a bit of a Trojan horse. I drive it into town, saying, like in England, I did the same thing. Urban birding, it's great. It's a new rock and roll when it comes to ornithology. It's like doing meditation or yoga. You don't need to have any skills or you don't need to know anything. And people love that because I'm more interested in trying to engage with people who never thought about it before. So the urban birder thing is great because people, they kind of think, urban bird, what's that? And then they're interested. So it's like a lure. It's a bit of a sort of a, not a trick, but it's trying to get people interested. But as a person, I watch birds everywhere, but I do get excited more than anything by being in an urban area because it's a place where you don't expect to see birds. I mean, I do, but most people don't expect to see birds. And when you take them out or you go out yourself and you see all these things, you realise, actually, there's more around than I thought there was. So it's a real kind of excitement which you can actually get from your doorstep. You don't need to go anywhere.
We have been seeing footage whilst you were speaking of you in London, doing urban birding, obviously. Right. But the most logical question is why we do birding, not just urban birding. Here in Malta, as BirdLife Malta, our mission is to, encourage people to enjoy the beauty of nature, the beauty of birds, their migration, to protect them. And I suppose this is something also you work for because you encourage people to look up, and I know it's your tagline now, look up, to see birds. But in the end, finally, why? Because we want to preserve and to conserve nature, no?
Yes, but also it's great for well-being. Something that us birders have always known, maybe not been able to articulate earlier on, but certainly always known. And now it's a thing. People now know and have done research. And it shows that being out in the open and being exposed to nature is so good for your mental health. So for me, it's more than just watching birds. It's actually being out there and actually being able to be yourself and be human. Because we're so sort of hung up on rushing to work and all the stuff that we get in our social life and the hubbub of urban living, which is affecting us. So it's nice to stop, even just for 10 minutes. I mean, I always advise people, just to stop for 10 minutes, sit in a park bench and just sit there and sort of phase out all the sounds around you, the car alarms, the police, alarms and people calling their dogs and stuff. Just phase it all out and start tuning in to nature's wavelength. And it's actually quite easy to do that. And once you start doing that, you begin to feel really grounded. And, I've had all sorts of people who've never even thought about birding doing that and then turning up and actually realising, actually, I feel a lot better. I can face whatever I'm doing, you know, because it's great also as a problem solver. If you've got problems, just get out in the field.
Yes, yes.
And, you know, get yourself
In fact,
connected.
on previous editions of NATURaLment, we discussed several topics, including also nature education and how important, exactly as you explained, even for children, to be out in nature, to engage
Especially
with
for
nature,
children.
especially for children, mentally, physically, and also there are benefits. Studies we have carried out also with the university have shown that when children do their lessons outdoors, they are more prone to, you know, learn, take in what they are learning. You have been for a week in Malta already, and another obvious question would be, obviously in London it's different because the urban birding, so many parks, so many open areas. As you could see, Malta is more built up. It's one of the most densely populated areas in the European Union. And from what you've seen, is urban birding something which we can really do in Malta also?
Yeah, you can do urban birding in the most central of urban jungles. I mean, you know, it's possible. I mean, I've been looking around the streets here. I mean, in honesty, I haven't seen a great deal, but there's loads of, you know, Spanish sparrows to entertain yourself with, and there's stuff that occasionally flies overhead as well. But I've been in very sort of urbanised areas. I'm not just London. I actually live in Spain, but in 16 years, I've been to, what, 340 different cities around the world. And some of them are fantastic. Others, you need to work a bit harder. And the ones that you need to work harder in are actually more of a challenge for me. I think it's more exciting. There's a few cities in England, for example. There's one called Hull in Yorkshire. And I remember when I was going there, people saying, Hull, you're not going to see anything there. But I got to Hull. Actually, it's one of the best cities I've been to in terms of birds because, you know, there's lots of parks and areas where there was lots of things there, you know, but people just don't look. And that's the thing. We need to get out of this mindset that we're in a city, so therefore there's nothing here. There is stuff there, but we need to also encourage it. You know, it's great if we can, especially in a built-up area, have more green roofs, for example. It'd be great if people, if they've got a garden, try and allow parts of it to go wild to help invertebrates, which, you know, will help the chain of ecology to survive. In Britain, we've got this horrible trend happening now where people are having plastic lawn, AstroTurf lawns, which is like...
Terrible.
I feel like vomiting every time I see one, which is quite often these days. And, you know, why are we turning away from the natural things which will make us better, you know? Think about it in that respect. Don't even think about nature, think about yourself. Make things more natural, it'll help you feel better in your life.
How is urban birding different from other types of birding? In the sense that if I go to, I don't know, the north of Malta by the coast, I would see certain species of migratory birds, which I wouldn't see coming into the urban areas, no? So is there a difference in the type of birds you would see, also in the migration patterns of birds which would not go into urban areas whilst they're migrating, and others which would?
It's interesting because people think that there is a demarcation between rural and urban, and that there's no kind of crossover. In fact, there's a massive crossover. In Britain, we've had 620 different species recorded, of which I say at least 85% have been found in urban areas.
Okay.
And I'd imagine the same actually applies here. Often we don't think it because we don't look in the urban areas. We just automatically think we need to be out in the countryside. Of course, when you're out in a more wilder area, you've got more opportunity to see things. But urban areas are very interesting too because birds get used to humans and you've got more chance of seeing them better, which actually
gets closer, no?
Yeah, which is great for people, especially when they're beginning. So in terms of the difference between urban birding and birding elsewhere, for me there's no difference. The only difference is you're surrounded by buildings, and also you might have a cafe nearby, you can have a cup of tea. You know, that's the only difference. But I think it's so important because most of us live in urban areas, certainly in this island, and I think that, as I said before, if we can kind of nurture a situation where we try and encourage wildlife to flourish even in tiny pockets, you know, of our urban areas, that will bring in things that you'd never expect. I mean, in London, I've seen migratory birds, you know, I've seen wheatears, for example, northern wheatears, all the time passing through London. My favourite bird is a bird called a ring ouzel. I'm not sure if you ever get them here.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a bird of mountainous, wild areas, in Britain anyway, and certainly elsewhere. I thought as a kid I'd never get to see one, yet My first time I saw one properly was in London.
In an urban area.
In my local patch. In fact, they come and see me every year because we have a spiritual connection, but that's something different we can talk about later. But the thing is, these things turn up. So it's all about opening your mind, your heart, and everything else to the idea that you can see anything. Anything can turn up anywhere at any time. And, you know, you'll be surprised. So I think you can see anything in any area.
But do birds find food in urban areas? Obviously, we are taught that birds go to certain particular habitats because they can find food there or refuge there. When they are in urban areas, what type of food do birds find?
Well, it depends. I mean, in Malta, from what I've seen, there's not many wetland areas within the urban area. I've seen.
Not much, no.
Yeah,
no.
So, I mean, for wetland birds, they're going to be struggling, so they need to find somewhere. But if there was a wetland in the city that was looked after, I'm sure there'll be elements of the birds that you see outside coming to it. I see that very often in other cities where, you know, you just have a pocket, a park, and there's a lake and there's a woodland, and you get a segment of all the stuff you see out in the wild, but in that city. So, you know, they can turn up anyway. But, you know, if there's trees that bear fruits or seeds, you'll be finding the birds and other wildlife that actually use those trees. So it's all about encouraging birds and wildlife, other wildlife, by the habitat. You create small pockets of habitat. I mean, it's fractured, you know, it's not amazing, but at least it will bring something in. So other birds adapt to urban living. I mean, I've noticed quite a lot of pigeons here, for example. But other species I've seen have adapted because they've become more bold. They've actually switched their diets a little bit. They've even changed the way they live, like peregrines. In Britain, for example, peregrines used to be a bird that you'd only find on the coastline.
Exactly, yes.
But now, or since the Second World War, and certainly since the 70s, 80s, they began to kind of encroach into the cities, and they use the tall buildings as surrogate cliffs. And now they've changed because their territories, like, for example, in London, have become a lot smaller. So there's like 24 pairs of peregrine in London now, something like that, which is the second highest density of urban peregrines in the whole of the world after New York. Mm-hmm. And because they've got the food source, which are pigeons. Exactly. Okay. Whereas in the wild, they've got to search a bit, you know, wider for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we have the case of the blue rock thrush, which is the national bird of Malta, and we have been noticing that before it was, you know, breeding on the cliffs, mostly on the coast, but we have been seeing it move more inland, you know, to deserted buildings in the middle of small villages. So
I saw one in the middle of Valletta.
You did? Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the title you were given by the BBC Wildlife magazine as one of the most influential persons in the world in terms of nature conservation. Now, what does that mean for you?
I'm embarrassed, actually. I mean, I was voted the 7th most influential person. I think number 6 was Prince Charles or something. So it's kind of... But the reason why I got that accolade was because a year before, I, on my own, put together this campaign to get Britain to vote for a national bird. Okay. And I didn't really get a lot of help from most NGOs, so I did it by myself and with help from friends. And I managed to get 250,000 people to vote.
Wow.
And I also managed, through a PR person who helped me at a very low cost, to reach or to attain £7 to £8 million worth of airtime, press coverage and radio time for my campaign. And it ran alongside the general election at the time. So it was really making front page news. And plus I had a campaign vehicle. I was driving a Rolls Royce around the streets of London, and it had all the birds on the side, and vote for Britain's national bird, and the speaker, and I had my microphone, vote for Britain's national bird. And I was driving past Buckingham Palace. Your Majesty, vote for the swan. So it got a lot of publicity. And it was the biggest, I think, the biggest sort of personal, non-sort of organisational vote ever in Britain. So that's part of the reason why I got that. For me, it's not about the messenger, it's about just getting that message out. I don't really, I mean, it's on my sort of credentials, of course, but I don't really refer to that. I find it a little bit embarrassing, but it's good to be recognised, I suppose, but I just carry on doing what I need to do, which is to try and engage with people.
Well, I mentioned it in our promo because obviously it was something which I was reading about, and I think it's quite an honour to be one of the most influential persons in terms of nature conservation in the world. You just mentioned also broadcasting. So I know you have broadcasting at heart also, and you have a background in broadcasting. Can you tell me a bit about this also and how it interacts with birding?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been asked to. I was in the beginning of my career, which has been 16 years now. I've always since been doing a lot of stuff on TV, and I actually enjoy it because it's a really great opportunity to surprise people. Again, I don't want to use race really, but I'm one of the very few black people talking about natural history, so automatically you get people's attention. B, I'm talking or labelled as an urban birder, so people think urban, and again, you get attention. So I use those two elements very carefully to actually try and promote my message, which is to get out and just to open your mind and your eyes and your ears. So broadcasting, I've done TV, radio, I do all of the things that, we talk about. And I enjoy it because I like to be kind of a little bit unconventional. I don't really whisper behind bushes. I'm much more interested in sort of having a laugh and a joke and getting people engaged that way. And also, it's very important to tell people that you don't need to be an expert. You can observe wildlife without knowing what it is. That's what I did for years until I found a book in the library. So you don't need to know names. You just need to be able to feel and to get out there and actually just enjoy what's around you.
Whilst you were talking also, we were showing some footage of bird ringing. So this is something also which comes part and parcel with urban birding, but bird ringing in urban areas, no?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a ringer. I used to work for the British Trust for Ornithology. I was head of membership, and British Trust for Ornithology in the UK are the sort of the main gatekeepers when it comes to ringing. And if I'm honest with you, I'm going to tell you something, Nathaniel, that no one else knows.
Okay.
All right? Don't tell anyone.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
But I used to be really afraid of birds. I couldn't touch them.
Really?
Yeah. I hate birds.
We'll keep this between us.
Yeah, between us. Don't tell anyone else. But I used to hate birds flying around my head and stuff. So when I joined the British Trust for Ornithology, and they do the ringing all the time, I forced myself to go out and to help with the ringing and sort of hold a bird, and I eventually got over my phobia, mostly. So, yeah.
The video I mentioned, in fact, we're seeing it now.
Yeah, ringing is important, but now with the advent of satellite tagging and radio tagging, it's become much more interesting. We can learn a lot more, even though there's a far smaller amount of birds we're actually following, but it's a very interesting and important thing to do.
Going back to broadcasting and sharing your message also on socials, I know that you also lead a very successful series which is called In Conservation With. It's a series of webinars, and we have been invited a couple of times also as BirdLife Malta to talk about the situation in Malta. Can you tell us a bit about this? And we'll also see some footage of one of the webinars.
Yeah, In Conservation With was born during the lockdown, during the pandemic. I was in Spain, trapped in my apartment because it was pretty draconian. You weren't allowed out even for exercise. So I was in my house for 3 months eventually. But I wanted to talk to people, and I wanted to talk to people within the world of conservation, but ask them questions that people don't normally ask. I'm a bit cheeky now and again, so I decided, I'll start this thing called In Conservation With, because the idea is that these people may not necessarily be, full-on birders or conservationists, but they're involved in conservation in some way. So it started like that, and 4 series on, I've got quite a sort of a strong following. You can find it on my YouTube channel, The Urban Birder, The Urban Birder World even. And I've interviewed people ranging from your good selves at the BirdLife Malta through to people like Margaret Atwood, and, we've got a British explorer called Ben Fogle, plus other people involved in the world, people who are studying a particular animal, insect, plant. It's not just birds, it's the whole of the natural world. And I've learned so much from it, and it's a great resource. I mean, if you watch the videos, you can learn so much about different aspects. I mean, the last one I did was a woman who was talking about how animals make sounds that we don't hear because our range of hearing is like that, whereas most animals are infinitely more than us. So, using special equipment, they've heard that whales can mother whales talk to their babies, and they have dialects, and they even have names for each other. You know, it's just fascinating, and we're just scratching the surface. So you learn so much, and I love this series I do, which starts in October and ends in April, and, you know, I advertise it on my website.
Very good. I suggest our viewers also to have a look on your YouTube channel, and there is at least 2 episodes I can remember where BirdLife Malta was invited. Our conservation team was speaking about the situation in Malta. So, first half hour flew, we have to go for adverts. In the second part, we'll be joined by Steve Zamitlupi, and we will talk a bit about more the local aspect of urban birding, and I also am interested to hear what you think about the situation in Malta, obviously, in terms of persecution of birds, because we have this big problem with hunting and trapping. I'm sure you know about, because you have also spoke about it in your series, webinar series, so it would be interesting to know your views about that also. Ħamorru għal-reklami, kif nġulura ħamorru għal-feature qasir bħas-soltu, u fit-tieni parti miegħi u ma' David jingħaqad fl-istudio Steve Zamitlupi. Bqgħu magħna.
BirdLife Malta ilha għal dawn l-aħħar 60 sena taħdem biex ittejjeb l-ambjent naturali ta' pajjiżna. Programmi edukattivi, immaniġġjar ta' riservi naturali, riabilitazzjoni ta' għasafar feruti, xogħol ta' konservazzjoni. Issieħeb magħna llum u għenna nkomplu nħarsu in-natura.
Seifert Systems is a pioneer of sustainable manufacturing in Malta. The first manufacturing company to be certified CO2 neutral, we are reducing our footprint both from operations and our product's life cycle. We have over 2,800 solar panels on our facility and added a further 330 this year. We are employing cutting-edge technology to gradually supply all our own electricity and water. Join Malta's sustainable manufacturer. Join Seifert Systems.
Insetti u speċi oħra jistgħu jkunu ta' detriment tal-ambjent tiegħek. B'aktar minn 50 sena esperjenza kom tiktib protezzjoni kontra dawn l-ispeċi. Għal aktar informazzjoni ċemplinna jew żur is-sit tagħna. Jekk trid tisserraħ moħħok, komtek.
Żbieħux, iżda kont taf li dawn u pjanti oħra aljeni invażivi qed jagħmlu ħsara lil wirt naturali Malti, meta speċi mhux tal-post jiġu introdotti fl-ambjent naturali, dawn jistgħu jagħmlu ħsara billi jirdu annimali u pjanti li huma tal-post, jaffettwaw il-bilanċ naturali kif ukoll is-saħħa tal-bniedem u l-ekonomija. Kun responsabbli tiksirx il-liġi billi tintroduċi pjanti aljeni invażivi fl-ekosistema naturali tagħna. Għal aktar informazzjoni żur is-sit elettroniku era.org.mt.
Sotis, prodotti għazbuħija kemm għan-nisa kif ukoll għall-irġiel. Sotis għal trattamenti ġewwa salons professjonali. Sotis il-prodotti li għandek bżonn għal kura tal-ġilda tiegħek. Sotis.
Wasal is-sajf u mas-sajf tiġi sħana. Żomm id-dar tiegħek friska bejsi mingħand Paulson Zejtun. B'7 snin garanzija.
X'inhi r-rabta bejn Roberta Bela, Joseph Muscat, Vitals u Stewart? L-akbar frodi. Akkwista l-propja tiegħek għal donazzjoni ta' €25 mid-dar ċentrali tal-Partit Nazzjonalista. Tista' tornaħ ukoll billi tibgħat €25 bil-BOV Mobile lil 7710 5905. Tinsix tinkludi n-numru tal-karta tal-identità u l-isem tal-ktieb fid-dettalji tal-pagament. Jew mis-sit elettroniku pn.org.mt/donazzjoni.
Iċċelebra l-festa ta' jum l-om ġewwa l-Cortile Restaurant. atmosfera mill-isbaħ u ikel tal-aqwa kwalità. Għal din l-okkażjoni se nkunu tinservu bufè għal prezz ta' 45 euro kull persuna u 18 euro tfal taħt 12 sena. Biex tibbukja l-mejda ċempel issa 21-490-534 9949-8903 jew żuru s-sit elettroniku ilkortile.com.mt. Parking mhux problema. Il-Kortile għal dawk il-momenti sbieħ.
Poster kbir kommemorattiv fl-okkażjoni tar-rebħ tal-BOV Premier League minn Hamrun Spartans u tar-rebħ tal-Elizabeth FA Trophy minn Birkirkara. Nhar il-ħadd li ġej mal-gazzetta Il-Mument. Poster li kull partitarju ta' Hamrun u Birkirkara m'għandux jitlef. Il-Mument tal-ħadd li ġej timbieħ €2.
Europa Tours, għażla sabiħa ta' vjaġġi għal dan is-sajf bħall-Italja, Franza, Svizzera, Turkija, il-Maċedonja ta' fuq u postijiet aktar imbeda bħal Tajlandja, Singapore u Malasja. Immorru f'parks ta' divertiment bħal Gardaland, Europa Park, Walibi Park u ħafna vjaġġi oħra. Nizzel il-katalgu mis-sit europatours.org jew ċempel 21250 526. L-aqwa kwalità, servizz u prezzijiet, Europa Tours il-Furjana.
The Like with Like challenge at Fair Deal Furniture. Found a lower kitchen price elsewhere? We will beat it.
So many people go through life without noticing anything. They walk through life with their blinkers on. My moniker, the Urban Birder, is a Trojan horse, which I drove into town to convince people that birding in urban areas could be seen in the same light as meditation and yoga. My mission in life is to try to connect people living in urban areas with nature and the environment around them. This is where it all began. This is my bedroom, which has been modified by my mum. Every morning before school, I get up at dawn just to see what birds are around before going to school. So that was my therapy, actually. I didn't realise I was actually getting involved in that, but I was doing that from that age. And that's something that you can do quite easily.
Nilqakom lura l-programm Naturalment ta' din il-ġimgħa fejn qed niddiskutu kif stajtu taraw mill-ewwel parti mistieden internazzjonali fl-istudio minn Londra David Lindo di Urban Birder qed niddiskutu l-kunċett ta' urban birding. U issa miegħi fl-istudio magħna fl-istudio ingħaqad ukoll Steve Zammitlupi li nirringrazzjah li aċċetta l-istedina għal darb'oħra diġà kien magħna f'Naturalment meta tkellimna jekk minix sejjer dwar il-pasta tal-asafar. U ħanitkellmu issa dwar kunċett ta' pasta tal-asafar ukoll imma fl-urban, qed nitkellmu dwar l-asafar fl-urban. And before we continue to discuss a bit in English, allow me to speak a bit so I can also introduce Steve with us. L-urban f'Malta. David kien qed jispjega li ovvjament is-sitwazzjoni f'Londra hija differenti, għandek ħafna parks, għandek ħafna ħdura, Malta hija limitata. Imma xorta nagħmlu, fil-fatt jiena ddeskrivejtek bħala di Urban Birder ta' Malta x'naf li tagħmel ħafna osservazzjoni tal-asafar birdwatching fil-postijiet urbani, jewx.
F'sens, Malta huwa pożżaj u kif jaf kulħadd id-densità ta' bini huwa wieħed pjuttost għoli, naħseb huwa wieħed mill-iktar postijiet fejn hemm densità ta' bini għoli fl-Ewropa. Jekk m'iniex se jiżbal kważi 40% tal-art huwa art mibni. Ġifieri naħseb huwa l-inqas post li wieħed jistenna li jista' jiltaqa' ma' natura speċjalment asafar, però jekk wieħed jagħtina iktar forsi attenzjoni ta' varjetà ta' asafar li wieħed ma jkunx qed jistenna li ħatarhom f'kuntest urban. U dak propju jagħmel l-idea li tmur tfittex l-asafar f'żoni urbani iktar interessanti.
In fact, as Steve was explaining in Maltese, the introductory comment about urban birding in Malta, that we are the second most densely built-up country in Europe, and despite this, you can still, as you were explaining, find birds and do some bird watching also in urban areas. What are your impressions about Malta? Because I haven't asked this question. You've been here a week. About the infrastructure in Malta, the way, as I was explaining, that we are very, very built up, but also about the situation in Malta in terms of, and now allow me to go a bit into the trapping and hunting issue, the situation in Malta in terms of protection of nature and birds.
Well, this is my first time to Malta. I've been here already 7 days. I'm staying for another 4. I'm hanging out with BirdLife International for the second half. The first half I was actually on a conference because I'm a travel writer.
Okay.
And it's with the British Guild of Travel Writers, so I'm here with them initially. I found the city, or found, should I say, Malta, parts of it to be very beautiful, the actual sort of historic areas. And many of the people I've met so far have been very friendly, smiling and saying hello and stuff. So that's good. In terms of birding, well, I've not actually been full-on birding yet because I've been with my colleagues who are birders.
Exactly.
But I've always got my binoculars and camera with me. But one thing I have noticed that there wasn't a great deal to see. It was very sparse in terms of not only numbers of species but numbers of birds themselves, apart from your Spanish sparrows and feral pigeons.
The most common birds you can see in built-up areas.
So that was good. The thing is, many British birders, and I'm sure you know this, I'm sure other nationalities, but certainly I can speak on behalf of the British, wouldn't consider coming to Malta for birding, because of the reputation the island has for its hunting. And what was interesting was that when I was at the gala dinner for the British Guild of Travel Writers, the sort of head of the tourism for Malta came and spoke. And one of the things, firstly, he showed a film, one of those sort of classic films that shows the beauty of the island and all these perfectly toned young people in bikinis jumping into the river, into the sea and stuff. It was all lovely. But then they had a drone shot around the shore and there were some CG birds that flew off. And I was thinking, you know, that can't even be real birds. I had to put in animated birds. And also, when the guy was speaking, he was talking about all the wonderful things about Malta, you know, the history, the diving, all that sort of stuff. But never once did he mention that word in nature. And if anything, it's my wish that one day that word can be included in the description for Malta.
Of the Maltese Islands.
Yeah, because it deserves it. And I feel very sad that, you know, it's got to a stage where, you know, there's this whole battle going on in many ways to try and stop people. I've spoken to various people on the street about the trapping and hunting issue, and it's interesting to hear their stories because I think it's important to have both sides. And for many people, it is a tradition, but it's even more deep-rooted than that. You know, the trapping side, I spoke to someone whose father was a trapper, and then when the laws changed and he couldn't trap as much or it was illegal, well, it should be legal anyway, but he basically fell into a depression and eventually died. And it shows that there is much more than just... This is something really quite deep, actually, which I don't understand because I don't come from this kind of culture. And I'd like to learn more about that, so that's why I'm here to just try and find out. I'm not here to point fingers because I know that in England we have a terrible record when it comes to hunting as well. You know, we kill hen harriers, a bird of prey, which, you know, has almost been wiped out of England, as well as mass shooting of things like red grouse and pheasants. So, you know, I can't talk. But, you know, I think it's really important that we learn that we need to protect our environments, even if it's just for our sakes. And if we're killing things that we think are just fun, eventually we're killing ourselves, a death by 1,000 cuts. So I'm a bit disappointed, really, with that. I want to go back and write an article and tell people that you need to come to Malta, not only for the history, but also to try and you know, show people that actually, you know, it's great to enjoy wildlife. I just hope that day will come. It's just that many people I know wouldn't come here for the reasons of it.
Yes, unfortunately, we have that reputation. And apart from this tradition, if you can, I'm very skeptical if you can call it a tradition, we have a big issue with enforcement also. And I would like also to discuss a bit that because I know that during your series of webinars, our people from conservation have explained how the major problem is of enforcement and the illegalities which happen rampantly, especially during the open seasons. But going back to Steve, he mentioned, David mentioned that he went into some urban areas and he didn't see much. But before you arrived, we were discussing how people can, through their own small patch, increase the possibility of seeing more birds by attracting them and, putting the right things to attract birds which are passing over through urban areas. And I know you've been doing a lot of work on this also, campaigning for more trees in urban areas. How important is this?
Well, birds at the moment we are passing to spring migration, so birds are in a rush to move further north. So when they're around, they're usually here for a very short time. So there are instances where you can go out in urban areas and also in rural areas, and there isn't much to see. And that can quickly change when the weather changes or the direction of the wind, which would bring in plenty of migrant birds that stop for a bit to rest, to feed, and they continue migrating up. So, you always have that expectation that you're awaiting the birds to arrive, and once they're here, you want to go out to bird watch. The importance of trees, obviously, even in an urban context, is very important. Obviously, birds in general, especially passerines, which are the smaller birds such as warblers and robins and starlings and stuff like this, are attracted mostly to trees. So any urban areas which have small pockets of trees would obviously attract any birds in the area to visit these trees, to find insects and to rest. We also have particular trees that are good also for roosting birds. You've mentioned Spanish sparrows. All our Spanish sparrows, every evening they congregate in trees, most of them in urban areas, especially ficus trees, to roost. In winter we have a white wagtail roost in Valletta, in front of the courts, where we have practically all the white wagtails on mainland Malta. Every evening they fly into Valletta from everywhere, so from Mellieħa or Marsaxlokk, they would fly into Valletta to roost in the ficus trees. And BirdLife also organize a roost count.
Yes, we were mentioning it before.
And we count almost, I think, around 13,000 white wagtails that come in to roost in these urban trees in Valletta, which obviously highlights the importance of trees in an urban context. We also get starlings that roost in several sites around Malta.
We have footage of them at junior college. We will
even most of, for example, our spotted flycatchers that breed in Malta. We have around 30 pairs, so it's not a lot. But the majority of these breeding spotted flycatchers, they do so in Aleppo pines in urban areas, so in cemeteries, in parks. So in May, June, I shift to these pockets of pine trees in search of spotted flycatchers.
Don't forget the trees are also good for carbon offsets and also soaking up the pollution, which there is a bit of here, isn't it?
Definitely.
As Steve was mentioning, we, as BirdLife Malta also, are trying to increase these possibilities by, he mentioned the white wagtail roost count. So apart from the event which takes place every year to count the numbers and to get a better understanding of how many birds roost in this urban area, we have been having discussions with the local council of Valletta, for instance, the capital city, to make sure that these trees are not pruned, so they remain the roosting site for these birds. So I wanted to ask you what are your views about this work which is being done by BirdLife Malta. But before, let's go for the advert break, because we have another advert break and we'll come back and we'll speak a bit about your views about the work which is being carried out in terms of increasing these type of habitats and also habitats not in urban areas by BirdLife Malta for the protection of birds. Ħamorru għal reklami niġrura biex inkomplu bid-diskussjoni dal-waqt. Lest tirrilassa f'ambjent tranquill il-bot mill-ġen u l-istorbju tal-ħajja ta' kuljum, żur waħda mir-riservi naturali ta' BirdLife Malta u gawdi l-kampanja u l-ħabitati differenti tal-Gżejjer Maltin. F'dawn is-siti uniċi tista' titgħallem aktar dwar l-ekosistema, l-ispeċi lokali tal-flora u l-fawna u fuq kollox tqatta' ftit ħin għall-pinnatura. Ir-Riserva Naturali tal-Għadira fil-Mellieħa toffri spazji miftuħa u medda ta' bur sal-mastru. Is-Simar bis-swit il-Bajja tax-Xemxija toffri żona bis-siġar tal-Bruk bil-qasab li joffri kenn għal diversi għasafar. Ir-Riserva tas-Salina fil-limit tal-Qawra iżżewwaq l-istorja mal-ambjent naturali. Il-Foresta 2000 taħt it-Torri l-Aħmar toffri mixjiet mill-isbaħ f'bosk li jestendi kważi minn kosta sa kosta b'veduti pittoreski. Miftuħin fi ġranet u ħinijiet differenti matul il-ġimgħa kif ukoll nhar ta' Sibt u Ħadd, id-dħul għar-riservi ta' BirdLife Malta huwa dejjem b'xejn.
Il-ħarġiet tagħna fil-kampanja għandhom ikunu sostenibbli. Il-limita l-iskart li tipproduċi u uża kontenituri, platti u aċċessorji oħra li jistgħu jibqgħu jintużaw. Għażel li tissepara l-iskart biex eventwalment jiġi riċiklat. Evita li tieħu miegħek fil-kampanja ikel proċessat u għażel ikel naturali tal-istaġun. Bi ftit kreattività u ħsieb, il-fdalijiet tal-ikel ta' fost il-ġimgħa tista' titrasformhom fi snacks appetitużi għall-piknik tiegħek.
Palaces, forts and auberges. Walk into an exclusive world of spectacular locations. Make history with your wedding and let us make your dreams come true.
BirdLife Malta ilha għal dawn l-aħħar 60 sena taħdem biex ittejjeb l-ambjent naturali ta' pajjiżna. Programmi edukattivi, immaniġġjar ta' riservi naturali, riabilitazzjoni ta' għasafar feruti, xogħol ta' konservazzjoni. Issieħeb magħna llum u għenna nkomplu nħarsu in-natura.
Seifert Systems is investing in Malta like never before. From a new state-of-the-art sheet metal processing facility to energy-efficient and ergonomic machinery, Seifert Systems is setting new standards in capability, safety, quality, and speed. Join one of the leading innovators. Join Seifert Systems.
Sotis, prodotti għazbuħija kemm għan-nisa kif ukoll għall-irġiel. Sotis għal trattamenti ġewwa salons professjonali. Sotis il-prodotti li għandek bżonn għal kura tal-ġilda tiegħek. Sotis.
Lura fl-studio għal-programm Naturalment ta' din il-ġimgħa qed niddiskutu l-osservazzjoni tal-asafar f'żoni urbani miegħi hawnhekk fl-studio din id-darba mistieden internazzjonali David Lindo, the Urban Birder mill-Renju Unit u Steve Zammitlup li huwa birdwatcher membru ta' BirdLife Malta u anke tal-Kunsill ta' BirdLife Malta, però persuna li jagħmel ukoll ħafna osservazzjoni tal-asafar fl-urban. Going back to what we were discussing before the short advert break. From what you've learned about us also with the In Conservation series and this week you've been going around also with our people, how do you view the work we are doing? What is your take about BirdLife Malta?
I have nothing but praise for BirdLife Malta. I think, you've got a very difficult job. I think to get up every morning and to actually go out looking for things that would make most other birders cry on a daily basis, I think is admirable. I don't think I could do it. And I think also the fact that you've got very good public outreach as well. I speak to people in the streets and they know of BirdLife Malta, which is good. And it's not in negative terms either. They say, oh, they're doing really good work. I think it's a really good thing. So, you know, I take my hat off to you, and I totally respect all of the people that work with BirdLife Malta, and I know a few of them very well as well, so I really respect them.
Steve, meta konna nitkellmu fl-ewwel parti dwar l-safar fl-urban, jiena staqsejtu jekk l-safar li naraw fl-urban u mhix safar differenti minn dawk li naraw meta mmorru mal-kosta, meta nagħmlu birdwatching fir-riservi. Ovvjament, David spjegali li fix-xenarju tiegħu jara safar li qas tistenna li tarahom fl-urban, imma qed nitkellmu dwar ċirkostanzi differenti, l-Ingilterra, Londra, Malta. Jekk jiena mmur infittex la safar kif tmur inti fiċ-ċentru tal-belt, jew fil-bliet, jew fil-villaġġi, ħanara safar differenti minn dawk illi nara mal-kosta jew f'postijiet li mhumiex urbani u għaliex.
Mhux dejjem skont iċ-ċirkostanzi, pereżempju bħalissa li qegħdin fil-passat tendenza li safar li ma tkunx qed tistenna li tara fl-urban, li tarahom eżempju mal-kosta fuq ix-xari, f'postijiet fejn ikunu deħlin mill-baħar u jiqfu mal-ewwel art. Però tista' tinserthom ukoll f'żoni urbani li ma tkunx qed tistenna, jekk eżempju ssib pasfur li t-tendenza li taraħ fuq ix-xari jew fil-qasab mal-ilma u ssibu ġo siġra fil-bandli tal-lokalità fejn tgħix. Hija fiha ħarira aktar preġu li tgħid tara anke hawnhekk sibtu dal-asfur mhux is-soltu. Ġifieri hemm dak l-element ta' sorpriża. Hemm ċertu safar li adattaw għal kuntest urban li ħafna mill-ħin tagħhom iqattawh qalb il-bini, ġifieri safar semmejna fix-xitwa bħal żaka kappja, t-stornell, il-vjolin tax-xitwa, l-fjamma sewda, eżempju l-pitteros. Dawn huma safar li ma jdejqux jgħixu man-nies u qalb l-istorbju u t-traffiku u tarhom ġoġonna u btieħi u fej jkun hemm anke siġra waħda qalb triq mimli bini u ssibhom hemm. Mbagħad ġieli tara safar li pereżempju darba kelli ġambon blu li bl-Ingliż ngħidulu rock trash li huwa asfur li tistenna taraħ fix-xari mal-irdum bar minn Malta jrawh fil-muntani u kont sibtu fuq il-bejt fuq ħajt fuq il-bejt mal-ġirien tiegħi ġo nofs ħażebbuċ fejn ma kontx tistenna li se taraħ, però kien waqt il-passa asfur ġwiena għandu jekk ikun għaddej jħossu għajjin. Mhux ħajaħsibha darbtej li jinżel ikun fejn ikun.
U mbagħad għandek safar li konna narawhom iktar mal-kosta jew il-barra mhux fil-żoni urbani u llum qed narawhom iktar u xekk jidħlu fl-urban bħal Meril l-asfur nazzjonali.
Il-Meril eżempju asfur li huwa pjuttost mistħi, però fl-aħħar snin osservajna
rajna li daħal il-ġewwa.
Fil-ħarifa fix-xitwa il-frieħ li jkunu bejtu mal-irdum jitlu ġol-art ifittxu irkejjen ġodda. U hemm minnhom adattaw jiġifieri li anke jippruvaw anke jbejtu f'żoni urbani ma' xi kopla ta' xi knisja jew f'xi sit ta' kostruzzjoni. Anke darba kont sibt f'ħofra ta' żvilupp li kien għadu ma sarx kien ġie abbandonat, kien iżomm l-ilma u kienu bejtu par glalez, ġifieri anke f'post fej mhux post naturali fis-sens asfur irnexxielu jagħmel dik l-erja id-dar tiegħu fej kattar rabbi familja.
Facebook post u ta' gallozz qed issemm il-glalez li jinstab f'urban setting.
Intilef waqt il-passa tiegħu bil-tniġġis tad-dawl, problema oħra u waqa' ġo bitħa ta' nies.
Apologies for that, but we were talking a bit about what birds you can encounter in Malta also for the benefit of our viewers. We are seeing photos of some of these birds which you provided, Steve.
Daw stornell fil-massiġar tal-Junior College.
All in an urban setting. He mentioned a particular point, Steve, in his intervention now in Maltese, that there are also obstacles or problems, difficulties which birds face in urban settings, because there is the other side of the coin, such as, and he was mentioning a gallot, a moorhen, which was recovered some time ago. He had a Facebook post about it in an urban setting, in an urban area, because it collided it collided, no, you said, due to light pollution. So this is one of the main factors which, how important it is that we, cater for these type of problems which birds might face in urban settings.
Yeah, light pollution is a massive problem, a lot of collisions, especially on migrational routes and especially in places like the eastern side of the North American continent where, birds are continually colliding into tall buildings with their lights on, and sometimes they've got atriums with trees inside, so they think it's a tree.
And they go into the glass.
And it happens in London too with other birds. We've got woodcock. I don't know if you get woodcock.
Yes, it happens.
But they sometimes turn up dazed and confused, after being sort of flying into a building. So it is a massive problem, and in some places like in North America, especially in the US, they are actively getting people or cities to turn their lights off or dim them down at least during migrational time. So it's a problem, and I guess it's not a major problem here compared to other places, but, all we can do is try and turn off as much lights as possible. I mean, for our sakes as well, in terms of saving energy.
Is it a major problem? We are doing
I would say
measures,
it is.
no?
It's a problem, for example, with our seabirds, with the scope issue water. When the young start to leave their nests along the cliffs, they get disoriented with the lights, and instead of flying outwards towards the sea, they fly inwards, and they start to get retrieved. They find them lost on the streets or in people's backyards because the lights would distract them.
David, one curiosity I have, from all your experiences in urban birding and maybe not urban, what was your most amazing wildlife encounter?
I have amazing wildlife encounters every day. I can't normally think of one specific moment. I mean, there's so many moments, and that's the great thing about watching birds and wildlife, because your moment can come as soon as you walk out the door in the most unexpected way. I mean, I found birds in London, for example, that should never have been there, theoretically. I mean, I remember finding a common redstart. I'm sure you get them passing through.
Yes, we get them.
But on the 5th of December, one year, and it turned out to be Britain's second winter record ever. And also going to places where people don't expect to see things, and there's things there, even when you're with people who don't expect to see things. It's lovely seeing it with them there as well. So I think it's all about anything can turn up anywhere at any time. I've always got a very open and positive outlook. I feel excited every time I go out. Steve was telling me about some of the amazing birds that have been found here in the past, and I'd love to be here and find something like that as well, or with Steve or other people. So for me, it's a daily occurrence.
Steve, so if people had to start doing more urban birding, his tagline is look up. What would be your advice? Where should they go? They invest in binoculars and just go and look around? How does it work?
Yeah, I think it's that simple. Looking up is a great start. When we're on migration, if you're constantly looking up, at some point you're going to encounter a flock of herons passing by, or birds of prey, honey buzzards or marsh harriers soaring over the urban areas whilst they're migrating. So,
or a couple of storks on a church.
It's happened before. When we do get white storks, we've had them roosting on churches, on tower cranes. So you can encounter quite a lot of different birds. The good thing about urban birding is that even if you have a limited amount of time, or most of your day you are restricted at your workplace, the majority of people spend most of their day in urban environments. So if you have that setting and you have 15-30 minutes that you want to go out, you can do it. And nature, we want to live. Nature is amongst us. Exactly. So when we coexist with birds, you get to learn their appreciation and stuff like this.
Same question I posed to Steve, but coming from you as an expert in urban birding. How what is your advice to people to get connected with nature when living in a city, in a village?
Yeah, well, exactly what Steve said, but also I think it's nice to find yourself a local patch, find yourself somewhere where you visit on a regular basis. It could be a local park, it could be on the way to work, you pass something, or even your garden, and just study it. And over time, you begin to realise what birds are there normally, and then suddenly one thing will turn up that you'd never seen before, and that's exciting because that's your birds. It's on your domain, you know, and that's really exciting. It gets you really going. So I think it's good to find yourself a local patch. Don't worry about identifying things at first. I mean, buy a book and binoculars, of course, but don't stress, because many people think they need to see as many birds as possible. I need to get to this state. You do what you want to do. If you just want to watch birds in your back garden, that's great. If you want to become the next major birder in the world, that's great too. But there's no pressure. It's just what makes you feel good.
You also need to listen, open ears, because most birds, they give themselves away by calling, by their song. That's very important too.
Well, Hamaru, we're going for a feature which we do every other week. This is a feature during which we show the beauty of flora and fauna we have in Malta. Sometimes it's about a shrub, sometimes it's about the lizard, sometimes it's about the killifish. These are the topics we covered in the past. Today, this week, f'din ir-rokna kont taf li, we will focus on spring migration. We are at the start of May, so we are there now, slowly ending migration now.
Towards the end, but
towards the end.
Still plenty about.
And the feature of today is about spring migration in Malta, how you can enjoy this beautiful spectacle of nature. Ir-rokna kont taf li dwar il-pasta tar-rebbija, mbagħad niġu lura biex bil-mod nibdew nikkonkludu l-programm.
Kont taf li meta l-għasafar ipassu, l-adulti ġieli jtiru fuq quddiem biex juru triq liż-żgħar. Mill-banda l-oħra, ħafna speċi jsibu triqithom mingħajr il-bżonn ta' għajnuna mill-kbar. Matul il-passa, ħafna safar jużaw lil Malta bħala service station waqt li jkunu qed jaqsmu l-Mediterran. Imma dawn l-safar kif isibu triq matul il-passa? U l-frieħ jew aħjar iż-żgħar kif jirnexxielhom jagħmlu vjaġġ daqstant twil u perikolus. Bl-użu tax-xemx u l-kwiekeb u anke billi jħossu il-magnetic field tad-dinja, kull speċi toqgħod fuq għodod ta' navigazzjoni differenti tul ir-rotta tal-passa. Imma safar li jużaw ukoll is-sens tax-xam jew anke jiftakru punti ta' riferenza, landmarks, biex jaslu fid-destinazzjoni tagħhom. Il-mod kif ipassu hu differenti skont l-ispeċi. Xi għasafar bħal fjamingu u ċikonja jivvjaġġaw bħala familja. Biż-żgħar jitalmu r-rotta li jridu jieħdu mingħand il-ġenituri u mbagħad jgħadduha lill-frieħ tagħhom stess. Fl-estrem ieħor hemm id-daqquqa kaħla, bl-Ingliż common cuckoo, li l-frieħ tagħha lanqas biss qatt jiltaqgħu mal-ġenituri peress li jitrabbew minn għasafar ta' speċi oħrajn. Għasafar tal-passa adulti kapaċi jiftakru r-rotot li jkunu taru darba biss. Waqt li għasafar żgħażagħ li jkunu fuq l-ewwel vjaġġ tagħhom jużaw kumpass bioloġiku li jirtu mingħand ta' qabilhom u li hu speċifiku għal kull speċi biex isibu d-direzzjoni.
Hemmhekk il-feature dwar il-pasta tar-rebbija fir-rokna kont taf li illi nwaslulkom darbija u darba le. Ħanibdew nagħlqu bil-mod fadlilna ftit minuti, ħanibda minnek Steve. I will start from Steve and then I'll go back to you to conclude. We have just seen a feature about spring migration and the most logical question to end the program is how do you go, where do you go in an urban area if you are stuck in an urban area to watch spring migration?
Kieku kelli nagħżel xi postijiet li anka jien nħobb immur il-ġonna li hemm il-Furjana, il-ġinien tal-Bombi, iċ-ċimiteri huma postijiet tajbin ħafna fejn tara l-għasafar, eżempju la Dolorata, huwa kważi wieħed mill-ikbar pulmuni aħdar żoni urbani
ta' Malta.
Ġifieri huwa post tajjeb ukoll. Għandek il-ġonna ta' San Anton, post eċċellenti fejn wieħed jista' jmur jaħrab ħarbasem u jfittex la safar u jgawdi n-natura u jistih sentimenti ta' moħħu. U anka apparti li tisma' ħafna anka ġili titmur kmini fil-ħodu la safra ħafna drabi huma l-iktar attivi fil-ħodu u fil-ħodu ikun hemm l-inqas nies storbju traffiku u iktar hemm ċans li ssibhom inti l-ewwel qabel ma jitgerfxu.
David, my last question is on the same lines of how you end your In Conservation With series. I know that you always ask your guests the same two questions, so allow me to, today at the end of this interview, to ask these same questions to you. Very short, because we're closing. What's your favorite bird? I know you mentioned the ringdoozle, okay, but maybe you can tell us if that is your favorite bird, and if you could be anywhere right now in the world, where would it be?
Okay, well, my favourite bird is easy. That's the ringdoozle, without a doubt. If I could be anywhere in the world, actually, I'd like to be back in Extremadura in Spain, which is where I live.
Perfect. The ringdoozle, just as a correction from what I said before, we had some records of the ringdoozle, they told me, because I checked during the advert break. Thank you, David Lindo, our international guest in this program, who honored us with his presence today. Same goes for you, Steve. Thank you tal-li erġajtina għatmana. Nispera li sibtu l-program ta' din il-ġimma interessanti dwar suġġett li forsi mhux daqshekk li kontu tafu dwaru, ma issa nittama illi jinkoraġikom toħorġu anke jekk tgħixu fl-urban ma tkunx ċans tmorru sa riserva jew tmorru fil-kampanja u taqbdu sempliċi tromba tħarsu l-fuq taraw anka propju bħalissa qed nagħlqu l-istaġun tar-rebbija tal-pasta tal-asafar xi jasfur jew xi tajra interessanti meta tkunu fl-urban. Nirringrazzja l-Pawlu Gallia, direzzjoni, lill-persuni li kelli hawnhekk fuq il-kameras, il dawk kollha li kontribwixxu kull ġimgħa biex intellawlkom il-programm naturalment. Iż-żewġ sponsors prinċipali tal-programm għall-ħwejjeġ tiegħi Vigo Menswear u għall-makeup tiegħi u tal-mistiedna Peach and Sorrel u Janelle Marie, the makeup artist bi prodotti Sotis. Il-persuni li kelli fuq il-grafika, il-muntaġġ tal-features, il-daw kollha li kontribwixxu biex iwasslukom dal-programm kull ġimgħa. Nagħlaq hawnhekk nagħtikom il-lejl tajjeb nirringrazzja ovvjament fl-aħħar iżda mhux tinqas lilkom li kontu magħna l-programm ieħor u nagħmel appuntament bħas-soltu għal bħallum ġimgħa fl-istess ħin fid-9:05 nhar ta' ħamis naturalment fuq Net Television. Grazzi tal-li kontu magħna u l-lejl tajjeb.
Naturalment, jixtieq jirringrazzja lil Peach and Sorrel Wellness Center bi prodotti Sotis. Vigo. Makeup by Janelle Marie bi prodotti Sotis. Erġa' segwi dan il-programm fuq Net on Demand.
Made simple with Virtu Ferries. Spend relaxing weekend, mouth-watering food, pack it with adventure or culture, or visit one of the many shopping complexes available. Book your summer holiday now. With Virtu Ferries.
Poster kbir kommemorattiv fl-okkażjoni tar-rebħ tal-BOV Premier League minn Hamrun Spartans u tar-rebħ tal-Elizabeth FA Trophy minn Birkirkara. Nar il-ħadd li ġej mal-gazzetta Il-Mument. Poster li kull partitarju ta' Hamrun u Birkirkara m'għandux jitlef. Il-Mument tal-ħadd li ġej timbieħ €2.
Enjoy the taste of Gozo with your favorite salad. Hanini, a tribute to Gozo dairy heritage.
Għal dan is-sajf il-Brittanja qed joffrulkom ġiti kull ġimgħa li jibdew mill-5 ta' Lulju sas-6 ta' Settembru biex tgawdu iż-żbuħija ta' Zlatibor ġewwa Serbja li jinstab għall-Prim-Muntanji u l-Park Tatra. Ingawdu żbuħija ta' xmajjar marestużi uvak, kaskati u l-ħul antiki u ħafna postijiet oħra interessanti. Noqogħdu ġewwa l-lukanda Lussuża u ċentrali Zlatibor Mona ta' 4 stilel. Prezzijiet jibdew minn €499. Mela ċempel issa fuq 2123 8039 u iġbor il-brochure għal aktar dettalji. Brittanja, il-vjaġġ tiegħek jibda hawn.
Save 50% on a selection of models, like this sofa with sliding bed. Just pull here and look how much space at €898. Or this sofa bed with topper, easy to open, but above all to try at €1,089. Or this one with electric recliner, just a light touch and it adjusts to the centimetre at €1,198, but only until Saturday.
Poltrone sofà, solo divani di qualità.
Mayo Antipasti. Practical and delicious. Mayo, quality you trust.
Unleash your child's potential at the Mediterranean College of Sport. Professional development in football, athletics, swimming, water polo, and education. Register now for an early bird discount. Mediterranean College of Sport. Time to shine.
Kif issibu l-spoon stock? Konvenjenti ħafna u nuża biss kemm għandi bżonn.
Tajjeb ta' u għamil differenza fit-tissif.
Spoon stock. Tajjeb u jmur ma' kollox.
Working towards a dream is not only about the final destination. Those early wake-ups, the cold starts, these rough days are all worthwhile as long as you have the right people by your side, moving towards the right cause. Because it's who stands behind you that really counts.
Jum wara l-ieħor, ġimgħa wara l-oħra żieda fil-prezzijiet lanqas biss għadha sorpriża għal familja Maltin Watching. U tant saret xi ħaġa komuni li sfortunatament taħt Gvern Laburista mmexxi minn Robert Abela spiċċat xi ħaġa li lanqas biss tiskantak. Illum tixtri laħam, pakket toilet paper jew hops sliced għal prezz u ftit jiem wara issibu illi ulilek. Sa din il-ġimgħa stess il-konsumaturi reġgħu esperjenzaw żieda fil-prezz tal-butir, ta' tqiegħ u ta' zokkor apparti prodotti oħra li jinxtraw regolarment mill-familji. Il-pejs tal-oli tal-ħajja tant qed jikber illi ħafna mhux ilaħqu sat-tielet ġimgħa tax-xahar. Sa Settembru illi għadda ma' 86,000 persuna f'Malta kienu jinsabu f'riskju ta' faqar. Persuni